Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to crochet Lenny the Lemon. With a bright yellow hue that radiates sunshine, this happy-go-lucky lemon brings a splash of cheer to every kitchen and gathering. A refreshing presence that reminds you to always embrace life with zest and a twist of fun. This pattern, like all of the Kindness Company crochet patterns, is a quick crochet pattern, making it perfect for spreading crochet kindness. Lenny the Lemon can be made in sport, DK, or bulky weight yarn by adjusting your hook size. Today I'll be crocheting in worsted weight yarn and a 4mm crochet hook. If you haven't already, be sure to pick up the matching magical crochet greeting card to make an adorable gift that your friends and family will absolutely love.
Alright, so we are starting on Lenny the Lemon's pattern, and we're going to begin with the lemon, the body of the lemon, and with this sort of yellow colored yarn. And the very first thing that we need to do is form a magic ring. So let's review how to get a magic ring formed and how to make our first single crochet stitch inside. Alright, so let's review how to form a magic ring. So we're going to start by taking a little length of our yarn, and I'm using white for this demonstration. Make sure you're using the correct color for the pattern that you are following along with. So I'm going to take this white, and I'm going to reserve myself a little bit of a tail. So I'm going to take the end of that yarn, and I'm going to stretch it so I've got about 5 inches or so of a tail. And the tail is going to be the end that is not attached to our ball of yarn. So once we've got about 5 inches or so reserved of that tail, we're going to take our yarn hand. For me, that's my left hand, but if you're a left-handed crocheter, this might be your right hand. But we're going to take our yarn hand and make a bit of a finger guns here. So my index and my middle finger, I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to be looking at the inside of them. Then I'm going to take that tail that I've reserved, that 5 inches, and I'm going to lay it so that it's over the lower digit on my index and my middle. And then I'll take my thumb and I'm going to press it, the yarn, to those 2 fingers. Then I'm going to take my hook hand, which is for me my right hand, but could be your left hand, and I'm going to grab the working yarn. Once I've got that grabbed, I'll take it and I'm going to wrap it around the back side of my index and my middle finger so that it's sort of close to that top digit. I'll flip my hand over so you can see. So I want it to be close to my top digit, so you can see it's closer to the 2 tops of my fingers here. So we're going to wrap that around, and then once we've got it around the top digit of those 2 fingers, we're going to bring it so that it goes behind our thumb again. So I use my thumb and I pinch that second wrap in place. Then we're going to keep wrapping, this time going around the lower digit on our 2 fingers. So I'll flip my hand over so you can see these 2 wraps here. This is that one I just made, going around that lower digit. So we'll wrap around that lower digit, and then we're going to take our working yarn and one more time snug it behind our thumb, and then just pull it out of our way. So once we've done that, we should have 2 wraps and this sort of X shape on the insides of our hands. So once we have all of the yarn wrapped around our yarn hand here, we're ready to take our crochet hook in our hook hand, and we're going to flip our yarn hand over so that we're looking at the back side of our fingers. So we should have 2 wraps, one around the top digit, one around the lower digit on our yarn hand. We're going to take our hook and slip it underneath that top wrap, and then use the hook part to snag that lower wrap and bring it underneath the top wrap. Then we're going to take both of our hands and we're going to flip them over so that we're looking at the inside and away from our body. So I'm flipping out and away from my body. And then I'm going to bring my 2 hands together, so my yarn hand and my hook hand. I'm going to bring them so the index finger here on my hook hand can touch the back side of my yarn hand. Then using the thumb and index finger of my hook hand, I'm going to grab both the wrap on my hook and the wrap still on my fingers right where they meet. So I'm going to kind of snag the 2 of them together right there. Once I've got those pinched between my thumb and index finger on my hook hand, I can let go with my thumb and then gently slide those wraps off of my index and middle finger. So now that I've done that, let's locate both the tail that's the end that's no longer attached to our ball of yarn, so it's got this blunt cut end on it. And we're going to kind of pull that over into the 12 o'clock position, so kind of up and away. And then let's locate the working yarn. That's the stuff still attached to our ball of yarn. So once we've got those two identified, we're going to take the working yarn and begin tensioning it. So to do that, we'll take our index finger on our yarn hand. That for me is my left hand. Could be your right hand for you if you're a left-handed crocheter. And we're going to slip the working yarn over the top of our index finger. Then we'll take our middle, ring, and pinky finger on our yarn hand, and we're going to wrap those around that working yarn. Once you've done that, we also need to sandwich this working yarn in between our magic ring and our tail. So to do that, I like to take my middle finger and thumb on my yarn hand, and I'm going to grab that tail with my middle finger here. And then with my thumb, I want to grab the ring. So we don't want to grab our working yarn, which is kind of going in through that ring. We want to just get the bottom end of the ring here. And once you've got those two, we're going to kind of pinch them together. And you can see that sandwiches our working yarn in between the two of them. Once we've got those grabbed with our yarn hand, we can let go with our index and thumb on our hook hand. And the ring here that's on our hook is really loose. We'll tighten that by pulling our index finger up and away. You can see how that tightens that yarn. And then once we've done that, we're ready to yarn over and draw through the loop on our hook. So we'll take our hook, put the yarn over our hook, so I kind of just swing around the back side there and grab it. And we're going to pull that working yarn directly through the loop on our hook. Once we've done that, you can let go. It's not going to come undone. It won't come untied, which is very comforting because we've spent all this time creating it. The last thing we need to do before we're ready to begin is we're going to take the tail, and you can see it's threaded through our magic ring. We're going to take that tail and we're going to pull it out from the center of that ring. And from here, we're ready to begin working in the magic ring. We also need to work over the tail as well. So we'll take that ring and we'll take the tail and we're going to set them together so that we are working over both of these strands, the ring and the tail. All right, you are ready to go ahead and continue on in your pattern.
All right, so now that we have our magic ring formed, we're ready to go ahead and begin on round 1. And if you look at the top left-hand corner, you'll see the instructions for all of the rounds are going to kind of track with us as we crochet. So feel free to reference the top left-hand corner in addition to the written pattern. So round 1 is telling us we need to put 6 SC in MR, and then that parentheses has the number 6 inside. So let me translate what that means. 6 SC means to put 6 single crochet stitches in MR, which is the magic ring that we've already formed. And then that parentheses at the end tells us how many stitches we need to have at the end of round 1 before we begin round 2. So we're making 6 single crochet stitches inside of our magic ring. That gives us 6 stitches total at the end of round 1. So let's dive right in on making that first single crochet stitch. We're going to take our crochet hook and we're going to go through both the magic ring and underneath the tail that we used to tie the magic ring as well. So we'll take our hook and we're going to go through that ring and under that tail. And then we're going to yarn under, meaning we're going to put the yarn underneath our hook. And then using that hook, we're going to grab that yarn and pull it through the ring and up into a nice tall loop on our hook. And we should have 2 loops on our hook at this point. Then to finish our single crochet stitch, we're going to yarn over. So that means to put the yarn over the hook. And then we'll use that hook to pull the yarn through the only 2 loops left on our crochet hook. And that forms our first single crochet stitch. I also like to tighten this stitch by grabbing it with my thumb and index finger on my hook hand
and pulling it towards my hook to tighten it. We also need to mark this first stitch because when we crochet in the round, it'll help us keep track of where the end of the round is. So go ahead and grab your stitch marker, and we're going to slip it through both sides of that little V shape on the side of our stitch. So going from front to back, underneath both legs of that V, and then just lock your stitch marker to keep it in place. Alright, so there's our first single crochet stitch. We're going to continue adding them to our magic ring because we need 6 total, and we'll make them the same way. So take our hook, go through the ring and under the tail, yarn under, and pull a nice tall loop through our magic ring, then yarn over and draw through the 2 loops left on our hook, which forms our second single crochet stitch. Go through the ring, yarn under, draw through and up into a nice tall loop, then yarn over, there's our third, there's our fourth, there's our fifth single crochet stitch, one more, and there are all 6 of my single crochet stitches in my magic ring. So if you lost track while you were making them, you can always count by turning your work on the side and counting these little V shapes that are formed on the sides of the stitch. So I've got my first one marked, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And this loop on our hook isn't a stitch. It's sort of like a stitch in progress. Alright, so once we have all 6 of our single crochet stitches in our magic ring, we're ready to do the magic part, which is to take that tail and pull tightly, which takes the stitches we've made and forms a round with them and sets us up for round 2. So round 2, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet stitch in each of the 6 stitches we made in round 1. So our first stitch we've marked, we're going to take that marker out and keep our eyes on where it was because we're going to be putting our hook through that same place. So we'll take our marker out, and then we're going to put our hook through, just like we did with our marker, through both little legs of that V. So we're going to go from front to back and just push our hook underneath both of the little legs of the top of the stitch. And then from here, it's just like how we made our single crochet stitches in the magic ring. We'll yarn under and draw our yarn through the stitch itself and up into a nice tall loop, and then yarn over and draw through both of the loops left on our hook. And of course we need to mark that stitch we just made as it's the first of the round, and we always want to mark that first stitch. Alright, so there's my first single crochet stitch. We need to put 1 in each of the stitches from round 1. So find that next little V shape, this here, and we'll make our next stitch. So there's our second. We'll find the next V. So there's our third. You can see I'm sort of rotating my work as I go, so I can easily access those stitches. And here's my last one. And you can see I've made it all the way back to my marker, so that is the end of round 2. Before we move on to round 3 though,
I want to tighten my magic ring tail one final time, so give it a good tug. And then to keep it out of our way as we continue working around, I like to trim it. I'm not going to cut it all the way off. I'm going to just give it a little trim. Double check you're cutting your magic ring tail here and not your working yarn. And then you can discard this tail that we didn't end up needing. That keeps it out of our way as we continue working around. I find it gets in the way and is a little annoying. Alright, so we're ready for round 3, and we've got some new instructions here for round 3. So we've got these parentheses, and inside it says 1 SC, comma, 1 INC. So we know SC stands for single crochet, so that's saying we need to make 1 single crochet stitch. And then we need to make 1 increase. So let's just dive right in with what we already know. We'll take our stitch marker out, and we're going to make 1 single crochet stitch in the place that the marker was just in. And then mark that stitch. And then we need to make 1 INC in our next stitch, which is an increase. So to make an increase, we're going to put 2 single crochet stitches in the same stitch from the previous round. So we'll go through our next stitch, yarn under, drop a loop, yarn over, draw through both. And then we're going to do that a second time. So in that same hole, that same stitch from the last round, we're going to place a second single crochet stitch. And you can see that gives us 2 little V shapes coming out of the same hole or stitch from the previous round. And that's everything inside of the parentheses. If you look right outside, there's a multiplication sign and the number 3. That's telling us that we need to repeat those instructions that we just did. 1 single crochet, 1 increase, 3 times total. So we're going to continue repeating that pattern of 1 single crochet, increase, another 2 times, and that will give us 9 stitches at the end of round 3. So let's repeat that parentheses pattern a second time. We'll put 1 single crochet stitch in the next stitch of the round, then an increase in the stitch right after, so there's 2 repetitions of that. We'll do that one more time. 1 single crochet, and then 1 increase, and that was 3 repetitions of that parentheses pattern, which gives me 9 stitches and takes me to the end of round 3. So round 4, we've got another set of parentheses, but this time we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round before we increase. So let's take our stitch marker out, put our first single crochet stitch of our pattern, and then mark that stitch. I need to put a second single crochet stitch, so 1 in the next stitch of the round. So there's my 1, 2 single crochet stitches, and then an increase in that 3rd stitch. So that's 1 repetition of that parentheses pattern. Let's do that another 2 times for 12 stitches total at the end of round 4. So 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, increase, and then we'll repeat that one last time. 1 single crochet,
1 single crochet, increase. And that wraps up round 4. Round 5, we've got another parentheses pattern to repeat, but this time we need to repeat it 6 times total rather than 3. So we'll start with what we know. We'll put 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. Mark that stitch. Then put an increase in the next stitch of the round. And that's 1 repetition of that parentheses pattern. We need to do that another 5 times for a total of 6 repetitions, which is going to give us 18 stitches at the end of this round. So that's 1 single crochet stitch and 1 increase. And we'll just keep repeating that pattern. Alright, that's the last stitch for me. I'm ready to move on to round 6, where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. So there are my first 2 single crochet stitches. I'll go ahead and increase in the next stitch. And then just like the last round, we're going to repeat this pattern 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions, which will give us 24 stitches at the end of round 6. Alright, that's the end of round 6 for me. I'm ready to move on to round 7, where we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. Then we're going to place an increase in the next stitch. And then we've got a parentheses pattern to repeat, but this time we're only going to repeat it 5 times. And that'll take us to the last 2 stitches of our round. And if you look at the very end of the instructions that we've got, we'll end by putting 1 single crochet stitch in each of those stitches. So we'll go ahead and put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. Follow that with an increase. Then repeat that pattern another 4 times for a total of 5 repetitions.
Alright, that was my last repetition. I'm going to go ahead and put one single crochet stitch in the last two stitches of the round. And that wraps up round 7. So for round 8, we're going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round. So there are my first 4 single crochet stitches that I'm going to increase. And we're going to repeat that sequence 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions and 36 stitches at the end of round 8. Okay, that's the end of round 8 for me. So for rounds 9 through 19, all we need to do is put one single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way around. So remember to mark the first stitch of each round as you go. Here I am starting in on round 9. So you'll move your stitch marker up every time. And then we're just going to do one single crochet stitch in each of the stitches from the previous round. So I will see you back here whenever I have finished round 19 and we're ready to place our safety eyes. Alright, so I have just finished the 19th round of single crochet stitches and I'm ready to add my safety eyes. So I'm going to take this last loop here on my hook and pull it long and take my hook out of my work and set it aside. That way I don't have to worry about this stitch coming undone or my hook falling out of my work while I place the safety eyes. Also, if you're planning on giving Lenny the Lemon to a small child or to a pet as a toy, you may want to embroider the safety eyes on instead of using safety eyes. But if not, you can go ahead and grab your pair of safety eyes here. Here are mine. And I'm going to take the first safety eye and use the stem on the safety eye to find the 12th and 13th round, which is where the eyes are going to be placed. So first I'm going to take my work and I'm going to make it so that the stitch I pulled long is at the back. And then I'm going to take that stem and starting from our magic ring here at this point, count down to the 12th round. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then in between the 12th and the 13th stitch, I'm going to place that first safety eye. So there's that first safety eye placed. This is actually the bottom of the lemon, so if it seems like this is a little close, that's actually because we're going to be looking at Lenny from this direction whenever we're all done. So I'll grab that second safety eye, and the safety eyes are about 3 stitches apart. So I'm going to count over from the first eye that I placed, 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and place my safety eye through the work there. Now you can also adjust the position of these eyes. It can be a little higher or a little lower, or they can be closer together or further apart.
I'm pretty happy with this placement. I think they look really cute placed close together. So I'm going to go ahead and take the backs of my safety eyes and snap them on the inside of my fabric. Alright, so there are the eyes attached. And before I continue crocheting, I'm also going to add some stuffing to the body. So I'll take a little bit and push it all the way down to the point here at the bottom of the body. And then add some more to the inside. And we're going to continue stuffing this as we work, so no need to add more than this amount of stuffing at this point. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and reinsert our hook into that loop we pulled up long, and then we'll pull our working yarn to tighten that loop down. And we're ready to go ahead and get started here on round 20. So round 20, we've got another parentheses pattern to repeat, and we'll start with what we know, which is to put one single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round. So there are my first 4 single crochet stitches of that parentheses pattern. And then next we need to make a 1 DEC, which stands for decrease. So when we decrease, we're going to be single crocheting 2 stitches from the previous round together into 1 stitch for this round, which decreases the amount of stitches at the end of the round. So for round 19, we ended with 36 stitches. At the end of round 20, we're only going to have 30 because we need to make 6 decreases. So to do our decrease, we'll take our hook and going through that next stitch, just like we would when we were making a single crochet stitch, we'll yarn under and draw through that stitch. And then we're going to repeat that same process in the next stitch. So we'll take our hook and go through the stitch right after, yarn under, and draw up a loop. So you can see I've got 2 loops coming through the 2 stitches, and then the loop left behind from the last stitch that I made. To finish decreasing, we're going to yarn over and draw through the 3 loops on our hook. And you can see that takes these 2 stitches from the last round and puts them into 1 V, or 1 stitch, for this round. So we're going to continue repeating that pattern of 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round, followed by a decrease, and we're going to continue repeating that 6 times total all the way around. Okay, that's the end of round 20 for me. For round 21, we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first 3 stitches of the round. And then we're going to decrease in the next 2 stitches, so single crochet these 2 together to decrease. And that is 1 repetition of that parentheses pattern. We'll repeat that 6 times total all the way around.
That wraps up round 21 for me. Round 22 we'll start by putting one single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. Then follow that with a decrease. Then just like the last 2 rounds, we'll repeat that sequence 6 times total, all the way around. Alright, that's the end of round 22 for me. I'm going to take this time to add a little more stuffing to the inside of the body. So I'm going to pull this last loop up long again and take my hook out. And I'll just add a little bit more stuffing inside. Alright, I'm ready to go ahead and reinsert my hook and continue working. And we're ready for round 23. We'll put one single crochet stitch in the next stitch of the round. Then we're going to decrease. Then just like the last couple of rounds, we're going to repeat that pattern 6 times total, all the way around. Okay, that's the end of round 23 for me. Round 24, we're going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. And follow that with a decrease. And we're going to repeat that 2 more times for a total of 3 repetitions. That wraps up round 24, and then round 25, which is the last round here on the lemon's body. We're just going to put one single crochet stitch in each of the 9 stitches that we made in round 24. Alright, so I'm all the way around round 25, and I'm ready to go ahead and fasten off. So to start that, I'll take my stitch marker out, and we need to slip stitch, which is abbreviated SLST, in the next stitch of our round. So to do our slip stitch, we'll take our hook and go through that next stitch, the one that our marker was just in, yarn under and draw up through that stitch. And then the loop that we just created, we're going to pull through the only other loop left on our hook. And that's how you slip stitch. Then we need to go ahead and cut our working yarn, and we'll need a little bit of our working yarn because we're going to use it to sew. So reserve yourself about 6-8 inches or so, and then give it a snip. Then we're going to take that loop on our hook from our slip stitch, and we're going to pull our hook away from our work
until the end of the tail that we cut goes through that loop too. And we can tighten this slip stitch down into a knot by pulling that tail, which tightens it. Then before we sew up the lemon's body, let's add just a little bit more stuffing inside of the very end that we just finished crocheting. Alright, so there's the remainder of the lemon's body stuffed. Let's go ahead and close up round 25 by taking our yarn that we cut a tail of and threading it through the eye of a yarn needle. Then we're going to take this yarn needle and we're going to sew through the front loop of each of the 9 stitches left from round 25. So as we've been working, I'll use my crochet hook to show you because it's a little easier to see. When we've been working, we've been going through both of the little loops of that stitch. So the one we're going to be grabbing is called the front loop. It's the one closest to the front side of the lemon's body. And that's going to be just this loop right here. If it were the back loop, it would be the one closest to the inside of the body, this loop here. So as we sew, we're going to take our needle and just pass it up and in between those 2 stitches. And you can see I'm starting over here on the next stitch to the left of where my slip knot is, or my slip stitch is. So I'm going to go ahead and sew up through that first front loop, pull my tail through, then rotate and do the same thing on the stitch right next door. Alright, I've sewn through the front loops of all of those stitches. Then I'm going to take that tail and by holding my work, I'm going to pull the tail gently, which will close that last round off. Then we need to tie a knot and weave this tail in. So to tie our knot, we're going to take that tail that we've cut and we're going to loop it over the surface of our work. Make like a little O shape. And then we're going to sew through some of the stitches. I like to grab that slip stitch that we made especially. We'll sew through some of the stitches that we made in the body and then up through that loop that we just created. And then by pulling that tail, the loop that we made is going to wrap around the tail itself and tie a knot. Then to get rid of this tail, we're going to weave it in by sewing it into the lemon's body. I like to go through that center that we just made by cinching that last round together. And we're going to sew it inside of the body and then out through any place between stitches. That's going to pull the knot we just tied to the inside and also hides the tail of our work inside of the body too. Then we can unthread our tapestry needle or our yarn needle, and by taking our scissors and pulling that tail we wove in tightly, we can trim close to the fabric of the work, which hides the tail inside, and then of course discard anything that we trimmed. Alright, so we've got the crochet on the lemon done. Let's go ahead and add the smile next. So we're going to go ahead and take an embroidery needle and a little bit of black embroidery thread. And I've got mine threaded here through the eye of my embroidery needle. And our mouth is going to be embroidered on around round 15. If you remember, we put our eyes between 12 and 13. So 14, 15, it's going to be around this round and in between where the 2 eyes are. So let's start by sending our needle in between some of the spaces of a stitch to the right of the right eye. I'm going to send mine in through here. And then I'm going to come up through 13, 14, 15. I'm going to come up through the middle of round 15, closest to my left eye. And when I pull, I want to leave a little of this black embroidery thread on the outside of the body. We're going to come back and tie the two ends together to hide them inside. And then we need to sew the smile on. So a really simple way to sew the smile is to sew a straight line and then to cinch that straight line into sort of like a V shape to make the smile. So let's make our smile that way. Let's sew 1, 2, inside of that third stitch away from where we came up. And then we're going to send our needle up through about a row and a half below and then centered in between the first and second point. So you can see we have a straight line that's kind of grumpy looking here on our lemon. So to make it into a smile, we'll pass our needle underneath that long stitch that we just sewed. So snag just that stitch. And then we're going to double back over and pull that stitch down to form the smile. So we'll double over and then sew down through the same stitch we came up through to sew that stitch down into that smile shape. And then we need to come up through the same space we went down through where this tail is. So we'll sew down and then up through that same space between stitches. And this stitch is going to cinch the mouth down into a smile shape. And at this point we can unthread our embroidery floss from our embroidery needle. And we're going to take these two tails, the one that we just unthreaded and the one that we left behind when we started, and tie them together in a square knot. So just like how you'd start tying your shoe, and then pull tight. I also like to double mine, so tie a second square knot, just to make sure the mouth stays extra secure. Then once you do that, grab both of the tails, and we're going to trim them so they're short. And of course discard anything that you trimmed. And then to hide these on the inside of our work, we can take our crochet hook and by pushing it down into the fabric of the stitch right next door to where we have that knot and pulling our fabric up, we can hide that knot on the inside. If you have trouble getting the knot to hide on the inside, you can take your hook and push it to the inside of your work too. And you can see that hides those two black tails that we tied in a knot on the inside. And while we're sewing, let's go ahead and add on the cheek detail as well. So I'll take some of this pink yarn. You can also use pink embroidery floss if you'd like. And I'm going to thread it through the eye of my yarn needle. And just like I did when I made the smile, I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail on the outside in between the spaces between stitches. So like right here would be a good place to go in. I'm going to come up some on the outside of the right eye. And again, leave yourself a little bit of a tail to work with. And I'm going to sew just a straight stitch that's about a stitch long. And I'll come up on the other side of the other eye. And I'll sew a stitch about the same length. And then come up where I sent that stitch down into in the first place, where that tail's left behind. You can see that adds the cheek detail here on Lenny's face. We can go ahead and unthread our yarn needle. And just like we did with the black embroidery floss, we're going to tie a square knot. Again, I like to double knot mine just to be extra safe. Give the tails a trim. And then just like we did with the black embroidery floss, we'll slip our crochet hook in and pull the fabric of the work up and over where those tails are, which hides them inside. And that wraps up the lemon's body and face details. Let's move on to the next part of the pattern. Alright, so we need to make the arms, and they're going to be the same color that the lemon's body was. And we need to make two, so I'll walk you through how to make one, and then you'll have to make the second on your own, and we'll come back and assemble them together. Alright, so we need to tie a slip knot and chain some stitches to start the arms. So let's review how to get a slip knot tied and how to chain. Alright, so let's review how to tie a slip knot and how to form a chain stitch. So we're going to take our yarn, and I'm using white for this demonstration, so just double check you're using the correct color from your pattern. And we're going to reserve ourselves a little bit of a tail, just like we do with our magic ring. So I'm going to take maybe 5 or 6 inches or so of my working yarn here, make myself a little tail. And then we're going to take that tail and we're going to wrap it behind our working yarn. So we're sort of making like a lowercase letter B. So once we've got that wrapped around, we formed this loop here. We're going to kind of sandwich the working yarn with the tail. So bring it back around and kind of cross it over that loop. Sort of like a pretzel twist. Then when we've done that, what we need to do is draw this twist that we just done, that strand, through this loop without pulling the tail all the way through, because that would just tie a knot. So I take my hook hand, which is my right hand, and I grab what I've laid over that loop and pull it. And then with my other hand, I grab my working yarn and then pull the loop through. And the reason I form my slip knots this way is because they tighten when you pull on the tail, but not when you pull on the working yarn. It won't tighten while you're trying to add stitches to it. So once you've got that slip knot formed, you're going to take your hook and slip it inside of the slip knot, and then pull the tail to tighten it into a loop down onto your hook. Then you're ready to begin tensioning by laying the working yarn over your yarn index finger. So for me, that's my left index finger. And then wrapping the rest of your fingers around our working yarn. And then I like to hold on to the slip knot itself with my middle and thumb on my yarn hand. And then we're ready to form a chain. So to chain, we'll take our hook and we're going to yarn over, meaning we're going to put the yarn over our hook, and then draw the working yarn through the slip knot we tied, and then pull up to form a nice tall loop. So that's our first chain. To continue chaining, we're going to just keep yarning over and drawing a nice tall loop through each time. One final thing though, the loop on your hook, as I'm sure I may have mentioned in the video before, that doesn't count as a stitch. This is sort of like a stitch in progress. So right now I have 2 chain stitches formed. I'll yarn over and draw another stitch through. That'll be 3, 4. And as you add chain stitches, I tend to move my middle and my thumb up closer to my hook to help me sort of tension my yarn a little easier. So as I chain, I just keep shifting my hand down the stitches that I've just created. Alright, so that's how you tie a slip knot and chain. Alright, so now that we have reviewed how to tie a slip knot and how to chain, we're ready to go ahead and start in on the arms, and we're going to chain 9 stitches. Alright, there are my 9 stitches chained. Then to finish the arms, we're going to be working in the second chain from our hook. So remember, we don't count the one on our hook. So 1, 2, and we're going to make a slip stitch in that second chain from our hook.
So I'll push my hook through the center of that chain, yarn under and draw up a loop, and then draw that loop through the only other loop left on my hook. So there's our first slip stitch. We're going to continue slip stitching down this chain, making 8 slip stitches total. Alright, I am all the way down that chain, and I'm done with one of the arms, so I need to fasten off. I'll cut myself a medium length tail. Not very long, don't need much. And then I'm going to take both the tail from the slip knot and the tail that I just cut and draw them both through that last loop left on my hook and pull until they both go through. Then I'll tighten the one from the slip knot and the last one that I just cut. And that is one of the arms done. So we need to make one more and then we can attach them to the body. Okay, I have both of the arms crocheted and I'm ready to get them attached. So I'm going to start with just one arm and then take the shorter of the two tails, the one from our slipknot start, and thread that through the eye of my tapestry needle. Then I'm going to weave this tail in and use it to secure the arm to the side of the body. So I'm going to start by sewing the right arm, and I'm going to go about 3 stitches away from where I embroider on the cheek and sew this tail in and then just out through any place here on the body. And pull pretty tight, and then I can unthread that tail. That weaves this tail in and also helps hold the arm onto the body so that I have an easier time sewing it on. So now that we've got that tail woven in, let's go ahead and thread our needle with the longer of the two tails, the one that we cut after crocheting. And then we're going to sew into the body and up through the arm. So grab some of the fabric really close to where the arm meets the body and sew back up through the top of the arm. And that's going to secure the arm to the top of the body. Then we also need to sew the bottom of the arm sort of at this curved angle. So I'm going to sew down through the fabric of the lemon's body, and then I'm going to come up through the bottom of the arm here. And I'm going to use this stitch to tack this arm down. So I'm just going to sew down into that fabric of the arm, and then just out through any place. It doesn't really matter where you send the needle back out through. So you can see that tacks the arm down to the body, but still leaves it so that you can move it a little bit and pose it. So now that I'm done sewing this arm on, I need to tie another surface knot. Then I'm going to weave this tail in just like I did with the other tails. Then I can pull both of those tails tight and cut them, which gets them woven in. And that is one of the arms attached. We need to do the same thing on the other side with the other arm. Alright, there are both of the arms attached. I'm ready to move on to the next part of the pattern.
Alright, so the last thing that we need to make is the leaf for the lemon. So we're going to be using sort of this green color here. And we're going to begin by tying a slip knot and chaining, just like we did with the arms. So let's go ahead and get a slip knot tied. Alright, so I've got my slip knot tied. We need to chain 11 stitches. So there are my 11 stitches chained. And we're going to start in the third chain from our hook. So remember, we don't count the one on our hook, so 1, 2, 3. And we need to make 3 DC, or double crochet stitches. So to make a double crochet stitch, we're going to take our hook and we're going to wrap our working yarn around our hook. Then we need to go through that third stitch from our hook. So 1, 2, 3. Then we need to yarn under, draw through that chain stitch we went through. Then we're going to yarn over and draw through 2 of the loops on our hook. Then we'll repeat that again, yarning over and drawing through the last 2 loops on our hook. That forms our first double crochet stitch, so we need to make 2 more. Wrap our yarn around our hook, go through our next chain stitch, then yarn under, yarn over and draw through 2 loops, yarn over and draw through the last 2. There's our second double crochet. 1 more. So there are our 3 double crochet stitches. Then we need to make 4 HDC, or half double crochet stitches. They're really similar to a double crochet. There's only one small difference between the two. So we'll start with what we did for a double crochet stitch. We'll wrap our yarn around our hook, go through our next chain, yarn under and draw through that chain stitch. And then rather than doing 2 wrapping and then 2, we're going to just yarn over and draw through the 3 loops left on our hook, which makes our first half double crochet stitch. So we need to make 3 more. Draw through all 3 loops. There's my second. There's my third. 1 more. Then we're going to make 1 single crochet stitch in the next chain. And then in that last chain stitch, which is technically our slip knot, we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches. Just going to help swing us around so we can work up the other side of our chain. So I'm going to put my first single crochet stitch. Here's my second. And then we're going to place our third single crochet stitch, sort of flipping our chain a little bit here, on the far side of the chain. You can see that sort of swings us around so we're ready to work on the other side. I also like to take the slipknot tail with me as I work, so we're going to weave it in while we continue working in the next side, on the other side of the leaf. So we'll start by putting 1 single crochet stitch on the other side of the chain. So I'll push through. Then I'm going to take that tail from our slip knot and lay it over the top of my hook as well. Then make my single crochet stitch like normal. Then we need to make 4 half double crochet stitches. So we're sort of mirroring what we did on the first side of the leaf. So we'll wrap our yarn around our hook, go through our next stitch, there's my second half double crochet, my third, and my fourth. Then we need to make 3 double crochet stitches. Then we need to chain 2 stitches. And then we're going to go ahead and slip stitch to the top of this first stitch here on the other side. Which wraps up the leaf. So we can cut a tail and pull that last slip stitch through and tighten it down. We can also trim the slip knot tail that we worked in. And we're ready to attach the leaf to the top of the lemon's body. And you can choose however you'd like to angle the leaf on, straight ahead if you'd like it to look more like hair. I'm going to put mine sort of off at an angle. And I'm choosing to sew mine on rather than paste, but you can glue the leaf on if you'd like. So I'll go ahead and thread my yarn needle with the tail that I cut. Then I'm going to take the tail and use it to sew the leaf on. I'll just go through some of the stitches of the body and then through some of the stitches of the leaf. And I'm going to sew that a couple of times through to really secure it on. So those couple of stitches will help attach the leaf onto the top of the head. So to weave the tail in, I'm going to send the yarn through the body and then up through a place underneath the leaf. Tie another surface knot. And then weave this tail into the body. Can unthread that tapestry needle, and by pulling that green tight and trimming, I have woven in the tail from the leaf. Alright, and that wraps up Lenny the Lemon's pattern.